hardly be more anonymous. Even someone familiar with the historical significance of this particular spot, who has traveled several thousand miles to find it, and whose eyes are flickering wildly from the narrow blacktop to the grassy verge between road and river, can drive a couple of 100 yards past it before hitting the brakes. The language of the signs is equally undemonstrative. A stone marker carries a plaque headed "The Point of Beginning" that reads, 1,112 feet south of this spot was the point of beginning for surveying the public lands of the United States. There, on September 30th, 1785, Thomas Hutchins, first geographer of the United States, began the geographer's line of the 7 ranges. There is nothing to suggest that it was here that the United States began to take physical shape. Nothing to indicate that from here a grid was laid out across the land that would stretch west to the Pacific Ocean and north to Canada and south to the Mexican border, and would cover more than 3 million square miles, and would create a structure of land ownership unique in history, and would provide the invisible web that supported the legend of the frontier, with its covered wagons and cowboys, its farmers and gold miners, and would insidiously permeate its formation into the unconscious mind of every American who ever owned a square yard of soil. It is hilly country, covered in the same oak, dogwood, and hickory that Hutchins saw, and in the bright light of a September afternoon it rises high above the broad river in crimson and copper waves. For the distance of 46 chains and 86 links west, Hutchins wrote in his first description of the territory, the land is remarkably rich, with a deep black mold, free from stone. He was Robinson Crusoe, landed in an uncharted wilderness, and his purpose was to measure it so that it could be sold. It is easy to miss the significance of what he proposed to do. Surveying is old. Its 5,000-year history originates in riverside communities in the Middle East and in Egypt, who needed to mark the boundaries of areas to be irrigated by the annual flooding of the Tigris and the Nile. Measurement is older still, and the process is so universal as not to merit a second thought. Yet without it, the exchange of goods and services cannot take place. Measuring a length of cloth, or a herd of animals, or a day's labor, gives it a value in terms of size, or number, or achievement, which enables others in the community to offer something else, food, protection, even love or loyalty of equivalent value. Consequently, it is almost as necessary to human society as language, and it occurs in the earliest civilizations long before the development of writing. Incised bone and clay counters used for counting or exchange have been found at Neolithic village sites in Turkey, dating from the 9th millennium BC, more than 10,000 years ago, while the Sumerian cuneiform script, the earliest form of writing, does not appear until 5,000 years later. In a modern society, this remarkable human achievement is almost invisible. Glancing down supermarket shelves, we examine the prices, but have to make an effort to register the weight of a cereal box or the capacity of a carton of juice. Weights and measures are a given. A pound or a gallon, like a mile or an acre, will be the same from Florida to Alaska, and so will a bushel of wheat and a cord of wood and 100 other units of measurement. It is a language that is picked up automatically and spoken without conscious thought. Only when it changes, when half a gallon of cola became 2 liters in the 1990s, for instance, or a fifth of whiskey reappeared as 750 milliliters, is there a reminder that there is nothing certain about these units after all. They are not a given, but an extraordinary construct, and one of the identifying marks of social life. Without the conscious decision to agree on a way of measuring, cooperative activity could hardly take place. With it, marketplaces and increasingly sophisticated economies can develop, matching barter, cash, or credit to whatever is owned by one person and desired by another. Thus, by measuring out the wilderness, Hutchins would make it possible for someone to buy and own it. This was a revolutionary concept. For centuries, the land had been lived in by the Delaware, and passed through by the Miami, and occupied by the Iroquois, but no one had ever owned it. No one had ever thought of owning it. The idea of one person owning land did not yet exist on the west bank of the Ohio. Indeed, throughout most of the world and most of history, such a possibility was inconceivable. Individuals could certainly own the use of land. Whole dynasties might grow up around a particular estate, and the right of each generation to occupy and exploit that parcel of land would be unquestioned. But it could not be owned as a house or a bed or a pig was owned. The span of one life was too brief to possess the earth that continued forever. Territory defined the community, or society, or even the nation that lived there. A monarch or a ruler who embodied the nation might own it, but no one else. The idea that land might be treated as property belonging to an individual, to be traded, borrowed against, and speculated on like any other commodity, required a fundamental shift in thinking. The concept had been incubated in Tudor England and taken shape in colonial America, but only with American independence, achieved just 2 years before Hutchins' arrival on the Ohio, had it been fully realized. This was the magic that Hutchins would introduce into the western lands, the transformation of the wilderness into property. The wand that would make it possible was there in the first sentence of his report. The land would be measured in chains and links. In most circumstances, a chain imprisons. Here it released. What it released from the billowing, uncharted land was a single element, a distance of 22 yards. That was the length of the chain. Invented by the 17th century English mathematician Edmund Gunter, it was the surveyor's one indispensable tool, and the fact that its 22 yards were to become integral not only to the game of cricket in his own country, it is the length of the pitch, but to the town planning of almost every major city in the United States. The lengths of most city blocks are multiples of it, was a tribute to the instrument's usefulness. Repeated often enough, added, squared, and multiplied, measurement with Gunter's chain would give to the land beyond the Ohio a numerical value that someone could compute in money. But there was a double significance to Hutchins' work. Like all other units of measurement then in use, the length of Gunter's chain was ultimately derived from human activity and the dimensions of the human body. Hutchins' survey began at a critical moment in the history of ideas, when for the first time in 10,000 years those traditional measurements were challenged by systems derived from scientific discoveries about gravity and the size of the Earth. In France and Britain, scientists were devising new decimal units, from which the metric system would shortly emerge, but they lagged behind the United States. Before Hutchins crossed the Ohio, Thomas Jefferson had already invented a decimal system based on the length of the equator, which he insisted should be used in the survey. Nor was he alone in arguing for new scientific decimal measures. Of the Founding Fathers, George Washington, James Madison, James Monroe, and even Alexander Hamilton supported him, and all understood that the system used in the wilderness